Hello, welcome to today's session. Today we would be talking about how to write scoring essays for mains. So this we would be covering in 4 different sessions. We would be talking about how to write a good essay. Today we would be talking about the introductory section on how to write a good essay. So let's start with what is the basic importance of writing? Why do we need to write? Okay. Now let's start with any concept, be it anything. We read newspapers daily, we go across national news daily. So what we are basically trying to do is either someone is behind there who is writing the information. If we are going on a vacation, we need to write a leave application to our manager. Okay. So what we are basically having is a concept of writing, which is a part and parcel of our life. We are writing every day. In the lieu that we are writing something, we need to think. So thinking is an important part of writing. Now, when we try to write, there are few basic characteristics we need to highlight. And these characteristics make your essay different from other essays. And only if you have an essay which is different from other essays, you will get a scoring edge. Okay. If you need to score differently from other candidates, you must make your essay non-monotonous. So there should not be a simple writing style that's going on and on, reading which an examiner might sleep. Okay. It should have some brainwashing ideas. You should be able to introduce new ideas, provide suggestions. Okay. The reader must be spellbound. You can see good orators, and the characteristics of good orators are they keep their audience spellbound. Okay. Similarly, a good writer should also be able to keep the audience spellbound. That means if there are ideas that you have put into a writing, everyone should feel, okay, this is the correct thing and we cannot argue besides this. So you must keep the audience spellbound and convince. You should have an ability to convince the people who are reading your essays. And lastly, you should provide a cutting edge. That means you must try to make your essay different from what other people are writing. Now, when we talk about essays, we basically, not essay, just say writing, we basically focus on few basic things. First is understanding of the concepts. We must be able to understand the various concepts in the essay properly. Okay. We must have the knowledge of a concept. Okay. And that knowledge should lead to analysis. We must be able to analyze the concept based on our available knowledge and then form opinions. These opinions are very important. Once you have opinion, okay, if you are taking opinions from someone else, you will not be able to put them down in writing as easily as you can put your own opinions. Once you have your own opinions, you can express those. So expression of opinions is very important. Once you are able to express the opinions, you must create a proper flow of writing. And that flow of writing, or I should say the writing style, governs how much you will score in an essay as compared to your colleagues. Okay. So this is the basic fundamental that you must follow while writing an essay. Now, the most important section that we would be talking about today is an examiner's perspective. Consider an examiner who is checking more than 1,000 copies, okay, in a day. A person who is checking more than 1,000 copies in a day, how much time will he be able to spend on each single copy? Okay. So, to get a winning edge from examiner, what will examiner see in your essay? If you try to bold or highlight something, okay, that would be the place where examiner's eyes will go first. Okay. If you are able to mark something point-wise, give a comparative table or analysis, okay? Or if you are writing some quotations, the quotations you are writing in different colors, so you are using different colors. So these are some of the techniques that would help examiner focus on your essay much more than other essays. Okay, since examiner has a huge burden of checking copies, only the copies where examiner will find something unique or different, the probability that he would be reading and going through those copies is very high. And since he would like those copies, the probability of getting good marks is very much high. Okay. So if you try to follow examiner's perspective, this is the basic essence that you must follow. Now, different essays have different concepts. Like if I am talking about an essay which says about writing down the constitution, writing down about the constitution legacies in India and states. So that would be a kind of comparative essay, a comparison and contrast essay. Then there can be cause and effect essays. There can be essays where you can mention out similarities and differences between two things. There can be essays where you are highlighting the problems and then providing the solutions. For example, corruption in India. So you can first highlight the problem of corruption, why it is originating, who are the major people behind corruption, and what are the best solutions to curb this corruption or curb the black money that is recently highlighted these days. So this is an important topic for essay this year. Then you can mention your essay in a way where you are trying to explain something or providing an impact of something. So for example, an analysis of budget is a kind of explanatory essay where you are trying to provide impact of something. For example, a Mars mission. Okay, so you are trying to provide the impact on Indian science and how India will gain its importance in international scenario. Okay, so these are some of the kinds of essays that you are trying to focus. And while you are writing an essay, there are few basic things that you're trying to follow. You must have an introduction. Okay. Once you have an introduction to an essay, you will have a connecting link which connects it to the main body of the essay. And finally, a connecting link which connects it to a conclusion. So this is the general path that you would follow while writing. So you must have an introduction, a body, and conclusion. Okay. Today we will be talking about only the introduction part. We'll be covering the body and conclusion in the next session. So before we start with introduction, what is important here is organization of an essay. So you have a theme on which you are about to write. So first of all, what you will do, you will try to understand it, you will try to analyze and form opinions, then you will develop a flow of writing in mind. Okay. Once you have developed a flow of writing, you will say, okay, introduction is a must, I'll write an introduction. Then the next thing can be varied. You can provide a comparison or contrast analysis. You can start with similarities, you can start with differences, you can start with problems, then move on to solutions, and finally to a conclusion. So whatever we have mentioned here, okay, would be basically a part of the body of essay. But we are understanding here in the introduction because based on these, we would try to form a good introduction for the essay. Now, whenever you are trying to form an introduction or you are trying to write an essay, what is important? Can you see this picture and find something unique here? The most important thing here is the entry to the house is obstructed by this tree. Okay, you cannot move into the house because the entry is restricted. Similarly, your thoughts should not be obstructed. You should have a free flow of thoughts. Okay, Just because your family believes so or your culture believes so, you must not restrict your thoughts, because once you are restricting your thoughts, you cannot develop a good flow for writing. Okay, so the most important thing is allow a free flow of ideas when you are writing an essay. Okay, now let's start with the introduction. Introduction is a kind of cream of the cake. Okay, so when you are talking about introduction, what is important here is you are writing it in a very short and sweet manner. Okay, it should not be more than 3 to 4 sentences. It should form the basis. It would not give you extra points, but your points might be deducted if you do not have an introduction. Okay, you won't be given extra point for writing introduction definitely, but there can be deduction of points if you are not writing an introduction. You must know your audiences, whom you are talking to, and based on that, you should start your introduction. It's nicely said, well begun is half done. So your introduction should be very capturing. You should stay on the topic. You should be very emphatic about something. Okay, this is my opinion and I stick to this opinion. Okay, you should be able to convince the people whom you are addressing. And finally, you must know what you are about to write. So how will you start an introduction paragraph? An introduction paragraph can be started by stating your position or by interpreting the prompt that is asked. In introduction, you can definitely give examples. We'll look into a very good sample introductory paragraph. Okay, then you can talk about the main idea. It should be precise. The main aim should be grabbing the attention. So you can start with a famous quotation or a famous person who has given something or who has contributed to that dimension. Okay, there are various ways to introduce. Before we start about the various way to introduce, we should be very sure that our introduction is coherent with the body. Now see this image. What is unique about this image? You have a staircase which is moving from the third story, but it is ending out somewhere in the middle. So a person, if he wants to come down from his house, he cannot reach to the bottom floor or the road. So what is the problem here is, there is not a proper coherency. So if you are starting an introduction, there should be a proper coherency with the body of the essay, and finally the stairs should land down. Okay, so that is the main aim what we are trying to understand here, that we must be coherent with our ideas. It should not be segregated ideas that we are moving into. Now there are 5 fundamental ways that we usually talk about where we can introduce an essay. The first way is I can provide a historical review. The historical review means I can say that I can provide an idea about independence of India, for example. So I can provide a biographical sketch of Mahatma Gandhi or all the activist leaders who were highly involved. Okay. So another example of historical review is drugs and young generation. So where I can mention how younger generation was being affected by drugs and how this concept grew on. So that is a kind of historical review. The next way to introduce is anecdote. Anecdote is a kind of small story that everyone likes to listen. So for example, if I'm taking this class and I start with a very small story, you would be much more captured by it rather than if I start saying, okay, we'll be talking about learning today, learning has this, writing has this concepts. Okay, so if I start with a small story in the introduction of an essay, it would be much more capturing. The next way to introduce is I can mention a surprising statement. Okay, surprising statement means it's a kind of very interesting technique that is mainly used by professional writers. So if you go through, flip the pages of any famous newspapers and you go into the editorial section and just try to read 2 or 3 editorials. Okay, what would be the starting statement would be kind of surprising statement or a kind of critical statement which tries to emphasize something. So for example, if I have to write an essay on corruption or red tapeism, I can start with a very critical comment. For example, the government is doing so much, still the names have not been disclosed. So what I am trying to do is, I am trying to start it with a surprising statement, and at the end of that statement, I can mention why. Okay, that would emphasize that the government that was previously and the government that is at present, there is corruption that is inbuilt in both the governments. Therefore, the names are not being disclosed. So that is a kind of surprising statement where you can start with why, what do you think? Okay, so these are the kind of surprising statements that you try to introduce. The next way of introducing is mentioning a famous personality. Rabindranath Tagore believed this. Okay, so that is one way of starting. Another way is I can quote and I can say, "Arise, awake, and rise till not the goal is achieved," mentioned by Rabindranath Tagore. So we must start with working hard. Okay, we must arise and awake and then start to work. So what I am trying to do, I can introduce famous personalities in various ways. I can start with their quotations, okay, or I can just start with their name and say that they had a major role in this. Okay, so you can start with sayings of major scientists, national leaders, social reformers. The next way is declarative. Declarative is a kind of very straightforward idea. But this is generally not so preferred technique because 90% of the students start their essay with a declarative form of writing. Now there are some things that you must and must not do. Never begin your introduction with apologies. In my humble opinion, I am not sure about this, but that means that you are not very emphatic about something. Okay, and when you are not very emphatic about, that gives a negative impression in the mind of examiner. Okay, never directly tell your intentions in the essays. In this essay, I will talk about this. The purpose of this essay is to. That looks very kiddish or very childish. The next is never use dictionary definitions. Okay, because in an essay, the main aim is to put in what you have understood. Okay, so it's very important that you do not put dictionary meanings in a good essay. Now we'll be taking a same example of two introductions. So this is a kind of what I say is a good introduction, and similar introduction I'll write in another words and I'll say it is not that good introduction. Okay, so this essay is about learning from your failures. So if I start an introduction, I can say, I agree that sometimes we learn the most from our failures. In fact, sometimes failures make us realize that enables us to act differently the next time. This important lesson can be seen in World War II, the crucible and the failure of American peace mission in Somalia. So this is a kind of introduction which I feel is a good introduction. Now the similar introduction I can write this way. It is totally true that sometimes failure teaches us. Life is full of situations where we would just learn from our mistakes and we'll do it. So this is a kind of introduction that most of the students will learn. You are not mentioning any examples. So here you are mentioning the examples. So that is one positive point. This is a kind of much more childish introduction and much more declarative introduction, as we said before. And this would not fetch you that much marks as a kind of this introduction would do. Okay. Now you are done with what is introduction. Just take a deep breath. Hold on, shake your hands, count 3, 2, 1, and we'll start with the body and conclusion. That would be our next session. Stay tuned for further sessions on essay writing. Have a good day ahead.